Welcome, nerdy knights of the well-rounded table, to Bohemian Geek Studies, where we take extremely dorky dives into our favorite fandoms. I'm Queen of Queries and Defender of Droids, Sara O'Connor. Hello, hello.
Hello there. I'm
General
Colleen
McMillan.
Yes, I could be a general, I suppose. Jedi Master and Rebel Scum collaborator.
And I am Pirate Jedi, Anders Drew.
We truly run the gambit here in terms of rank, but no matter what rank you carry, dear listener, one thing remains constant for us all. Much to learn we still have.
Very true. So last time on Bohemian Geek Studies, we started our look at Sabine Wren. We took kind of a brief look at women in Star Wars history and examined Sabine's role as a warrior. Today we're continuing with that detailed dorky dive, looking at Sabine's role as an engineer.
And I would also say looking at the engineer role in general, which I think is really, really cool. It's almost like Sabine's a case study for us in a way. Anne.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that's very true.
Yeah.
So, as always, this episode contains spoilers for all of Star Wars Rebels. So if you haven't watched it yet, Colleen may hunt you down and force you to do that, but
like
go
Boba
watch
Fett.
it. Yes, go watch it, come back,
Never.
and
Yes,
if
I would.
you have, grab a drink from the cantina, sit back and unwind as we engage your mind exploring this magnetic Mandalorian. And with that being said, let's punch it.
Perfect.
All right,
Colleen,
everybody.
kick us off.
Here we go. Sabine, as we've said, serves as the engineer on the Ghost. She's the one with the most expertise in this area, besides Hera, because it's Hera's ship, and maybe Chopper. We're going to say Chopper probably knows how to fix the Ghost pretty well.
Certainly the insides and the outsides of the Ghost, if you know what I mean.
Yes, they have to deal with the ship's maintenance, but Sabine is really, really good at this. She's excellent at it. She's also an expert in explosives.
Yes, she is.
So great. All
She
her
does so many
explosions
cool
are so
ones.
great. She loves to blow stuff up. She's like the soul sister to our Bad Batch
Yes.
boys. She's also an expert in weaponry, and basic starship repair, like we said, as well as an innovative weapons designer, which we'll go into in just a minute.
Mm-hmm.
She's a very naturally curious person, which we love. She's always eager to learn. When asked why she left the Imperial Academy, her first response is, quote, "They don't like it when you ask questions."
Which is totally normal in the military, though I love questions, and I have to say that I love that this is one of several reasons why Sabine decides to leave. I think that's fantastic. You go, Sabine.
I mean, I absolutely understand that being like a military thing, but she was in like the engineering R&D type stuff, when that's really all you should be doing is asking questions. Because you're trying to discover and push things forward. So
yeah, you don't
those
want
are critical
to blow
there.
things up when you're not supposed to be blowing things up.
Yeah.
Also, we're digging even further in. While trying to escape from Agent Callus after recruiting Captain Rex to the rebellion, it's Sabine who is tasked with repairing the Phantom. This is the little ship, the little mini ship that's like the shuttle for the Ghost, in time to make the getaway. And everyone trusts her to do this. Like, Kanan and Ezra don't even bother. They just know that Sabine's going to be able to do it.
Imagine Ezra trying to fix something. Yeah, right.
And I also just think it's like such a small, like, if you're not really looking for it, you'll miss a moment, but just the amount of trust that they have in her there, where they just like look at her and they're like, "Sabine, we got to get out of here. Do it." And she's like, on it.
I got this, gentlemen. This is going to be fine. The ship's engine took a hit in the fight with the Imperial probe droid that had been stalking them, and Sabine's statements are about how she needs to fix it. Later, while under direct attack, Kanan just looks at her like, in her head and said, "We need the Phantom to fly." Good Lord, please, we need it to fly. And she said, "I'm on it." It's just, she works really well under pressure, and everyone looks to her with no questions. And
how old is she here? Do you know, Colleen, roughly?
16, 17.
Wild.
Yeah, this is season 2. She's only about 17 at that point.
Yeah. Okay, cool. What about in the
genius level at this very young age?
Yeah.
Of course, she got kicked out of the academy younger.
A total prodigy. What about in the season 3 finale?
Yep, it's her skills that allow the rebels to install a shield generator at Chopper Base, based on the generator they found during the episode Ghosts of Geonosis, Part 1 and 2.
Yes, and even before that, back when they were on Geonosis, like recovering that, there's this whole sequence where she and Zeb are they're trying to retrieve this generator core because they're like they notice it, and Sabine's like, I can install that back on Adelon.
Yep.
And they're going, but there's all these deactivated droidekas and destroyers around, so they have to that all get activated. And Sabine just in the moment is able to adapt this thing from being a generator that protects probably something the size of a city to just doing their local area, like the 5 feet around them, to shield her and Zeb.
Very
in good time.
impressive.
And she does that on the fly as all these droids are waking up, and it's just really, really cool to see.
Yep. And then she's gone at this point, back trying to help Mandalore, but after successfully getting the shield up and running back on Adelon, she basically saves them. She saves the rebellion because of the shield. They're like, this is Sabine's baby. Hopefully it works. I'm like, hopefully? What do you mean, hopefully it's going to work? This is when Grand Admiral Thrawn is bombarding the base. And she's not on site. She's just not there. So they're still very confident in her. It's stated very plainly by Zeb and Hera. Hera says, quote, this is really Sabine's baby, quote, then it should work.
Yeah. I mean, it's just trust. It's trust. It's just
trust in her abilities, in everything that she's able to do.
What about Anders, the Heroes of Mandalore?
Yeah, so actually just after all that, so now we're into the first 2 episodes of season 4, Heroes of Mandalore. Sabine's on a mission. She's brought Ezra and the Ghost Crew to free her father from an Imperial prison. And we finally get the full story behind the guilt she was expressing, we discussed in our last episode during Trials of the Darksaber. Yeah. So back when she was a cadet, Sabine developed a weapon that would work against Mandalorians by kind of energizing the Beskar armor that is unique to Mandalore, and use it against them. So it would kind of energize them, basically cooking and vaporizing the Mandalorian soldiers from the inside out without touching any of the Imperial troops. And this is obviously something that is weighing on her because she developed it, but then they
just a light little weight. This
is ultimately one of the things that made her leave the Empire, because she realized she had this kind of like attitude about it that she was like doing it just to kind of see if she could, to see if she could solve this problem and develop this thing
further ahead of.
And like, then she saw the Empire actually use it to help subjugate Mandalore. And it's this absolutely tragic thing. I actually saw kind of a connection here. We see a bit of this same type of an arc in Star Wars Resistance, which is a much lesser known, lesser watched animated show. Not as good, but I think it still has its moments. But we do have the character Tam, who in season 2 has joined up with the First Order and is slowly coming to this realization all the way throughout that season that the First Order is kind of not what she thought it was, and realizes she has to get out. So it was really interesting to see them revisit that same type of an arc and actually let us see it play out rather than just in hindsight.
Right.
But back like all of the rebel defectors kind of.
We always see them like right at the end. We don't get to see them coming to that in real time. So Sabine ultimately does sabotage this weapon after turning it on the Imperials, doing a little bit of light torture, just a little bit of light, just a little bit of torture to kind of get her point across. But she's brought back from the edge. They destroy the weapon and all of the associated data so that the Empire can't rebuild it. And I don't know about you guys, but to me, like this whole arc with this weapon, it kind of reminded me a little bit also of like Jurassic Park, where you've got Jeff Goldblum being like, they were so obsessed with they didn't stop to think if they should.
Exactly.
There's a lot of scientist characters like this who are trying to make breakthroughs and they don't see how it could play out. Like a lot of times, like, look at my great invention, this is what it does. And then someone else takes it and twists it into a weapon that they had not foreseen it being. This
Yeah.
happens a lot. It was in the new She-Ra show, and Entrapta kind of is like this, kind of going through everything for science's sake and not looking at the consequences of their actions.
Or like Elfon's quest and Edward's quest in Full Metal Alchemist to try and get the Philosopher's Stone. At least those precious, precious boys eventually decide, spoiler alert, cost may not be worth it. It's one of the rare instances I think you kind of see that play out in a different way, but that kind of shortcuts it all. But what is abundantly clear, at least in the Star Wars world, say that 3 times, is that we have a brilliant engineer with a specialty in weapons development, and Sabine shows her proficiency and proclivity for blowing stuff up as well. And I wonder, you two are infinitely better than I am. Where was Seamus Finnegan, from Harry Potter? Where did his character temporally, did he happen after, at least in the
way before?
portrayal?
No, he was way before.
Way
so
before.
Star Wars Rebels was like
2001.
2014, and
Sorcerer's Stone is like 2000.
the Sorcerer's Stone movie is 2001.
I feel like it's such an easy gimme delight to just have things explode in a safe, controlled kind of way, or at least
Yes,
against
who does not
the
love
enemy.
blowing stuff up?
Yeah, even if they're stormtroopers. But again, just a little bit of light
Just
torture.
Light murder.
Light torture,
There's only
looking
a
right
little
at
bit
him,
of
being
murder.
like, "This won't kill you."
Now I will say though, and speaking now as opposed to when Rebels first came out, I'm already almost starting to take for granted how new and special Sabine was in a particular way. So Anders, why don't you kind of start talking a little bit about the traditional roles and maybe how Sabine breaks them a little bit?
So the two types of things that we talked about so far today, the kind of the mechanic engineer and the explosives expert, are things that are almost exclusively usually male characters. You've got that classic kind of grease monkey ship's mechanic in the overalls, or the big brawny demolition guy. I mean,
with the chest hair spilling out.
Sarah, you mentioned, I think, or one of you mentioned earlier, the Bad Batch, which obviously those are all clones, so obviously they're all men anyway. But the explosives guy is the bigger, like muscly, hulking sort of guy. So to have that be kind of petite Sabine yet strong is definitely kind of breaking some traditional mindsets, which is really, really cool. It's really refreshing to see a woman who does embody all of those characteristics.
Yep.
And on the kind of engineer side, a female techie, quote unquote, is not really new. There was Kaylee in Firefly who had this kind of really natural instinct for ship's mechanics.
Yeah, and like Winry and Full Metal Alchemist certainly knows her way around. I mean, Edward and Alphonse trust her and rely upon her exclusively when it comes to what they need.
I'm gonna have to take your word on that one, Sarah. I promise I am gonna watch Full Metal Alchemist.
You better, and I cannot wait.
I've never seen the whole thing, so I also need to watch the whole thing.
So good.
I've seen it.
So there's also, on several other very long-running shows, you have the character that's the techie in the van. Kind of trope character, like Chloe on Smallville, Penelope on Criminal Minds, Felicity on Arrow. And don't get me wrong, I love all of those characters, and they're always fun and they're always great. But every single time, there's like at least one episode or an arc that involves those characters falling into being the damsel in distress that has to get rescued by the warrior man in some way. Even some of the stronger characters who do that trope, you've got like Willow on Buffy, Velma on Scooby-Doo, or still not over this, Charlie on Supernatural.
I would have some words with Eric Kripke about Charlie.
They don't get spared from that. They still end up being helpless in some way. And so that really sets Sabine apart, that she's not a fan of the word for this, but she's allowed to be a brilliant engineer and a capable warrior.
And Anders, let me ask you this before you continue. I know we talked about representation in our first video about Sabine, but with respect to all of these other engineers, at least the ones that I recognize from memory from what I've seen are white. Are
They're almost all
exclusively
exclusively white.
white.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean the white damsel in
Um,
distress. How many
There's an Asian American actress on the show Scorpion that
mhm.
is
that
a lot
falls
like
into
Sabine.
this?
And
Okay.
she's rarely in danger. She's the one who's always helping get the boys out of danger, which is kind of a nice change.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
predominantly they were pretty much white.
Okay.
Predominantly,
Cool.
this does end up being a white. Actually, I think for all the ones that I was talking about, very predominantly white blonde women.
Except
Yeah, I
Charlie,
mean
she's
that's when
ginger.
right.
Charlie's a ginger, Velma's not blonde, Willow's not, but I think all the other ones are.
Lots of redheads in there.
Well, I digress, Anders. Thank you. So yeah,
But so
continue where
Sabine
you were.
actually being able to be a warrior and a brilliant mind at the same time sets her in a much smaller set, I think, of women characters, such as actually talking a little bit more on representation, Shuri from Black Panther, who still absolutely shows up with those gauntlets when it's time to fight. And is probably the smartest person in the MCU. I think she actually is smarter than Tony Stark.
And Bruce, right? She's smarter
And
than
Bruce, yeah.
Yeah.
Then there's someone like, Samantha Carter from the Stargate franchise. And I would say a little bit of a lesser extent, but still definitely up there, Dana Scully from X-Files.
Yeah.
So she's an MD. She's
I mean, one of the
yeah,
OGs,
she's an MD.
right?
One of the OGs.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different because she's not really that like tech
engineer.
focused. She came from a time before that was really a big thing.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, Scully was one of the pivotal, and I think, and again, we're digressing a little bit, but because of Scully, more women got into scientific roles. So it really does flipping matter. So Colleen, why don't you talk a little bit about that real world context then?
Yep. Looking at the real world context, today we all know the image of that tech bro, quote unquote tech bro. Many people are surprised to learn that in the 1940s, the first wave of software coders were almost all women. For a few decades, coding was viewed as the equivalent to like secretarial work, basically the busy work. So women were the natural choice to fill the role at that time. Then during the 60s and 70s, a combination of aptitude tests that emphasized traditionally masculine knowledge or skills, and then the recession, of course, that caused many women to either leave or not enter the workforce. The culture began to shift to men, and the men became more and more involved in software engineering. The pay for the jobs started to go up, of course, with the newfound prestige that the job had suddenly acquired.
Just out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. Oh my God, what happened?
I love Colleen's facial expressions. If you're listening to this on the podcast, I strongly recommend you hop onto YouTube, but it's fine.
Oh man, yeah, this gets me. I love this part. The origins of the profession were mostly forgotten or written over.
Yeah,
Another
it was always a men's field.
Yes. Yes, always. So today, while this is rising for women, only 26% of tech jobs are held by women. And that's not even to begin to address the racial disparities in the tech sector. I've got some good stats here thank you, Anders. According to a 2018 study from Brookings Institute, Black people only make up about 7.9% of the US computer and math workforce, which is insane.
Yeah.
Hispanic people are even lower at 6.8%. So to see a woman of color like Sabine, it's insane.
Like I knew it was low, but when I actually saw those numbers, I was like, it's that low.
Yeah.
Which is very sad, which means it's not being geared towards them or pushed as a possible career choice.
Or once in, soon pushed out. Speaks the former attorney.
Oh yeah, even if you get access, you don't necessarily belong there.
Right.
With the rest of the crew. So to see a woman of color like Sabine fall so naturally into the role of the engineer, who is also physically capable in the warrior role, is something that should really be not overlooked. Like, we have to look into this and get more characters like this in future works, because it's realistic. women can do these things.
Right, and
They
they
do these things.
Yeah. Anders, do you have any additional thoughts on this?
So yeah, so just going a little bit more into some of the real world applications and the kind of stats and stuff behind this. Going to be a little anecdotal here. I actually consult with a program. It's called an Early College Opportunity Program that's based on it's known as the PTech model. If you're interested, I highly recommend looking it up. It stands for Pathways in Technology. It's geared towards being a partnership between industry, college, and high school. So students they start day one of their freshman year of high school working on their high school diplomas, an associate's degree in information technology or like management systems or something.
Wow.
And they're also trying to get some kind of an actual workplace internship. IBM sponsors most of these programs. So you end up trying to get like an actual internship with IBM, and you can potentially complete all of that in your 4 years of high school.
Oh, wow.
Jeez.
So get your foot in the door really
You get your foot in the door very quickly. So two of the main tenets of that program are actually that it is presented at zero cost to the students, so that associate's degree is paid for. So even if you finish and you decide you don't want to transition straight into the workforce, you have 2 years of college that have already been paid for. So you can actually enter a 4-year program halfway done already. And the other piece is actually that it is completely open enrollment. There's no admissions tests. There's no application fees. There's no nothing. If there's limited slots, then you might be in a lottery system. But in our program that I work with, we've seen that removing those two types of barriers, the demographics are much more reflective of the actual demographics of the society, the school as a whole. We have had almost 50% girls in pretty much every cohort. I think we actually had one that was 51 or 52% girls versus boys, and the racial demographics reflect those of the school as a whole. So removing
it's kind
those
of a rebellion.
barriers.
Yeah, it's like a rebellion of its own, right? A rebellion of access.
I was having a talk recently with someone actually who is retired from IBM. We were talking about ways to engage with young girls to get them interested in things like engineering, software development, and they were saying that you have to kind of get them early thinking about engineering as solving problems rather than you're going to do science and math. You present it as you're just solving problems, and they are instantly more engaged and more likely to get into it and remove that kind of cultural block that we pretty much impose on young girls.
Girls can't do math or science.
Exactly. So not only do we have to change that as a general concept, but just for now, just presenting it a little bit differently can get them in and then thinking, sounds like fun. I'm solving problems and puzzles.
Yeah. I can't remember what the product is called, but I think a woman who had graduated from Stanford created like an electrical play set that you can then charge like ohms through it. So if you're watching this and you have, I don't care what gender your kids are, I mean, it's a great product to build science. And if your kids are older, I would strongly suggest Challenge 24 cards. But I think that's fantastic, Anders, to help lift up diversity as much as Sabine does.
Yeah. All right. And with that, now we are going to move into Master and Apprentice.
Yeah.
We have some very, very great questions surrounding Sabine Wren, and I'll kick us off with one that comes from Sean. We actually addressed this a little bit when we were recording just recently around the Mandalorian Season 2 trailer. But he wants to know, aside from Tia Sircar, who obviously voiced Sabine on Rebels, who would we cast as a live-action Sabine? Now, I have mentioned previously that I'm still holding out hope for Ming-Na Wen, just because I want her to be in everything.
Yeah.
But that's probably not going to happen. And we talked a little bit about Tasha Banks with the Mandalorian trailer. Personally, though, I would really like a complete unknown.
Yeah.
Like a complete unknown quantity to be cast as Sabine. no extra baggage with previous roles, almost like no expectations going in, just letting them create something on their own.
Right.
And I think Star Wars itself is a good place to find unknowns because it is such a high profile franchise. It's a good place to make that name for yourself and kind of make a splash. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, unknown is by far my preference. Like for actually any Star Wars content, I actually prefer a complete unknown because for some reason in my mind, Star Wars literally is in a galaxy far, far away. So to see anyone, like even who's the actor who plays Charlie from Lost?
Dominic Monaghan.
Yeah, like when I saw him, I was like, "What are you doing? Like, you're not supposed to be here right now." He did fine in the role. He did fine.
They both like drugs.
Yeah,
both his
but
characters like drugs. It's fine.
But like, I want an unknown. If it has to be someone known, and especially if Sabine, I'm assuming that we're going to see Sabine when she's older, right? That's what I'm assuming.
5 years older than at the end of Rebels.
But I kind of like the idea, and I don't know if you guys have seen Babysitter's Club. I
have not.
Well, you should, because it is great. I really liked Momona Tamada, who played Claudia Kishki, I think it is, in the Babysitter's Club. I absolutely loved her in that role, and I could really see her playing a sassy, younger Sabine incredibly well. I don't know if she has any kind of fighting training. I feel like that's kind of important for me for Sabine. I just can't see someone who is stagnant in the role. I really want to see Sabine like in it. But I could see her playing the at least verbal role incredibly well.
Yes.
How about you, Colleen?
I talked about this a little bit in our discussion about the Mandalorian trailer. Also, I think Sarah, you may have dropped a hint to Disney about one of our friends that should play the role, and her name is Connie Lau.
Yeah,
throwing that out there.
Make it happen.
I could see that could work.
That could
be an amazing Sabine. If Connie is otherwise engaged, I would suggest Jessica Henwick. I really love her. She was in Game of Thrones. She had a bit role in Star Wars, and she was Colleen Wing in The Defenders and Iron Fist.
Yes.
And I think she would be fantastic. She's around the right age. She's got the background in martial arts. And I think she just has the right sassy attitude in order to pull off Sabine. If Sasha Banks is Sabine, I will accept that because I love Sabine and I would love to see her in live action. But Jessica would be my second choice after Connie.
We'll see what happens. What about the next question?
So next, we touched on this, today, Sabine coming to terms with her past, her very, very brief exploration of torturing Imperials. So a question I have for you guys, does this count as like a really traditional redemption arc playing out? And does Sabine really count as like a gray character? Because I think that's one of the things that we are all really drawn to in characters is that are not just so definitely black or white. Does Sabine count as gray?
Colleen, why don't you start it off?
I don't know if she's a traditional gray character. Like she doesn't start out as being more antagonistic or more do for herself. She is that kind of in the Robin Hood mold at the beginning of Rebels. And we don't get to see her really in her former role at the Academy or when she's a bounty hunting with Ketso. We don't get to see that. So we start off thinking that she's a heroic character, and then we find out about past experiences that definitely push her more towards the gray side. But I don't think she's traditionally gray. Redemption arc, kind of like a mini one, just because she does basically atone for her actions. Even though there is the light torture, that's fine. And she gives up her power, which I think is really interesting to also look at. Like she knows that she isn't really going to be the one to lead the Mandalorians. She knows that it has to be Bo-Katan.
Yeah.
And she's able to give up that power, which is pretty incredible because it's the Darksaber. It's like the coolest weapon in Star Wars. And
but she does come out of it in the end with an actual lightsaber, so
Yes.
Although she's just holding that.
Just on loan.
Yes.
I have to agree full-heartedly with Colleen. I sometimes think that she can count and should be considered a gray character, but definitely not a traditional gray character. We just didn't see enough of that gray. We saw like the laundry after it had already been washed, and she's still kind of washing off a little bit of the stains, if you will. Like I thoroughly love Sabine as a character, and I think they couldn't go where they would have needed to go in a quote unquote children's show with Sabine to show that gray character transition. I almost consider it in a way, and obviously they're different characters, but Uncle Iroh from Atla, where
that's an interesting one.
The darkness in the past.
Exactly.
That they're trying to live through.
And if they did decide to explore that past a little bit more, I would actually hope that they go all in on it.
Yeah.
I think that's
like show them.
That's actually one of the
Black Sun.
issues. I think that's actually one of the issues people had with Solo, is they didn't regress that Han Solo character back far enough. He was kind of like already starting with that heart of gold that we all love. And it's like, no, you're supposed to show us how he got that.
Exactly. Like it shouldn't be so easy to love if that's what the character actually is, but they're just not able to do that in Rebels. That's my take on it.
Yeah.
I'd agree with that. All right, Sarah, you want to give us our last one?
Yeah. And so on a lighter and maybe juicier note to kind of end things a little tantalizing until next time, Eva wants to know if Sabine is DTF Ezra. And if you don't know what DTF is, I strongly suggest that you look it up. And Colleen, I think you have a specific idea on exactly when and where you would want this ship to happen. If it did happen, shouts to our fan fiction episode.
Right. I don't think so yet. I think she misses him. I think she misses him a lot. Like he's kind of her other half by the end of Rebels, and they don't function as well apart as they would together. And I think that realization, when it hits them both when they're reunited, is when they're both going to be like, Interesting. I mean, Ezra could pull an adult Aang from Avatar and Legend of Korra and just all of a sudden be a smoke show. And then it would be even better if Sabine kind of ignored him, because
Okay, I'm going to. Can you explain what a smoke show is to me? And I am willing to lay down my pride for you to explain that to me.
A total hottie. Just like he emerges out of like a jungle or something with like longer hair.
Can I say that Ezra is already a smoke show?
Oh, I think
he's
really
too young
cute.
for me, but he's already
he's a cutie. Like he is a cutie.
Okay.
But Sabine won't have seen him that way. She sees him as like the brother figure or the friend figure.
Yeah.
She doesn't see him in any sort of romantic way. But 5 years can change a person.
Yeah. It's very, if any of you listeners have read the story Aragon, it reminds me a little bit of that, possibly, depending on how things pan out, relationship transition. But I am glad, this is one thing that I do want to bring up. I am glad that they didn't rely on the trope of relationships, especially in season 1 or season 2. What a relief.
Oh yeah, she has no time for him in that way. She thinks he's annoying.
What about
so funny.
What about you, Anders, before we close things out?
So along the same lines, I think a real relationship is possible in the future. You know, I'm on record before how, just like you said, I love the idea that Ezra and Sabine don't actually get together as a couple in the show, that they just form this deep friendship. But you know, a little fun speculation here.
Yeah.
I could see this playing out. So Sabine and Ahsoka have been searching for Ezra, and they find him with Thrawn. They have
Who's
that like
also very hot.
They have that.
We can say it. It's true. It's true.
We have that like that first reunion meeting. They walk up to each other. She hands over that lightsaber, and they're like locking eyes. And Ahsoka and Thrawn are just kind of looking back and forth at each other, like, I guess we're gonna give you guys a minute, maybe 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And walk out of the room.
Perfect. Well, I think now that I'm feeling a little bit hot and heavy, ready for that fan fiction, that is probably where we should leave things for today. So thank you all so very much for being with us, and come back again the next time when we continue our detailed dorky dive into Sabine Wren with her role as an artist. And also make sure to check out our other videos, because I'm super pumped. We have more videos, guys. You can check them all out. It's really exciting. So if you're watching us on YouTube, you better subscribe. And if you're listening to us on a podcast, you know that you can find us on iTunes, TuneIn, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So please, because it is working, y'all, keep telling Nerdy Knights about us, because it really does help. And it brings your Queen of Queries a little bit of joy, especially during these tough times. So thank you. Email us at bohemiangeekstudies@gmail.com if you have any questions, queries, theories, etc. And until next time, dark sabers up and keep those episodes streaming. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys. Cheers.
You guys, everybody.